G'day everyone. Look, obviously with the current state of play in the world, not just Victoria, with coronavirus over at the Legal Studies guy, we thought it was probably long overdue for us to actually do a new video, and hopefully something that's going to help a lot with remote learning, which is looking like a possibility for us all to be going towards in the next little while. So we've decided to have a quick look at a content point that is basically a guarantee to be on the exam. I mean, within limits, but there has certainly been questions on particularly VCAT, as that was on the old study design as well, pretty much every year for the last 8 or 9. So a really, really strongly tested content point over the years, and particularly because it is one of the ones that there are so many misconceptions about and so many gaps in understanding that students have. So we thought we'd jump in and have a look at that old dot point around the purposes of Consumer Affairs Victoria and VCAT in resolving civil disputes. Particularly, we are going to really focus on this question here. So how do VCAT and CAV actually work to resolve a civil dispute? So we're going to look at a sample dispute. We're going to then use the VCAT and CAV websites to really step through how they would resolve that dispute, and then hopefully get a look at, I suppose, their strengths and weaknesses, and gain a really good understanding of when they're appropriate and when they're not. And the case that we're going to use to do that, to really, I suppose, dig into exactly what you're going to need to do on an exam, is we are going to look at this case study from last year's exam. So hopefully you've seen this already. If you haven't, please make sure you jump online at your earliest convenience and read last year's exam. It is the best indicator of what you're going to need to know and need to be able to do for this year's exam. But for those who haven't seen this, this was question 3 in section A, even though section A isn't technically the case study section. They hit us between the eyes with a 5 marker on question 3 with a pretty in-depth case study here. So our case study was Zena, who spent $300 on a dress for her Year 12 formal. Hopefully we can still have those this year. Zena took her dress to the local dry cleaners because she wanted it clean before the formal, and when she went to pick it up, they didn't have it anymore. Since then, the dry cleaning store has refused to answer Zena's calls. Zena's found there's at least 12 other people with similar stories, and she recently went past the store and noticed that it seemed to be permanently closed. And she wants to claim the cost of this dress back. So she basically wants to make a $300 claim against no guarantees. And the question that we were asked on this exam was, discuss the appropriateness of VCAT in resolving this dispute. So basically, should Zena use VCAT? Now, you might notice no mention of CAV here, and particularly this was important in the, I think it was in the assessment report, but definitely discussed at marking, was the idea that you don't actually, and this has come out in lots of assessment reports before, because this question only mentions VCAT, you only have to talk about VCAT. So you don't necessarily need to talk about other places that Zena could go, but you're not barred from doing that. So you could have mentioned CAV when answering this question, and whether or not Zena or CAV could be a better option. So we are going to look at CAV as well in regards to this. So, as I said, we're going to actually go through, or we're going to pretend that we're Zena. So we're Zena. We need to figure out if VCAT is appropriate for resolving our dispute. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to jump straight onto the VCAT website, and we're going to go, okay, well, clearly I'm thinking about resolving a dispute, so I need to get started. And you can see all of these different options. You know, VCAT can look at equal opportunity, it can look at powers of attorney, health records, mental health, legal practice, now voluntary assisted dying, which was a new law introduced in the last couple of years. But in this instance, obviously, dry cleaning is a service, so and she has lost a good with that, but we are going to focus on goods and services, which I know most of or a lot of the questions that we've had about sort of VCAT in the last few years have generally resulted around goods and services. So we can see here that straight away we get a list of things VCAT can help us with and what they can't help us with. And you'll see here immediately faulty or poor quality products or services. So I reckon taking your dress to the dry cleaner, going to pick it up and the dress no longer being there, I would think that's a poor quality service, probably even a faulty service because they don't have your dress anymore. So they can help with that. So straight away we know VCAT is a potential option. You'll just notice the list of things they can't help with. Disputes between neighbours about fences, not VCAT. You want to go to the Dispute Settlement Centre in Victoria to kickstart that one. Employers and employees, car accidents, loss of luggage, so on and so forth. So we're going to fall firmly in this faulty or poor quality products or services. You'll notice here, one of the things that we need to consider before initiating a civil claim, dot point 3.2.3, I think it is, includes the limitation of action, so time limits. You'll notice that it's explicitly stated here that generally for things to do with goods and services, you've got 6 years to lay a claim. You're not going to need to know that level of specificity in an exam, but it is just interesting to look at. You'll notice that before you apply, it says that applying to VCAT is a legal step, and maybe you should contact Consumer Affairs Victoria first, which we have here ready to go, and we're going to look at afterwards because we're going to focus on VCAT as the bulk of this question first. But they do link you to a CAV, and you'll find later on that CAV try and link you back to VCAT as well. Look, a lot more information here that we don't necessarily need to look at now, and we want to get into what it's actually like applying to VCAT. But things like just making sure that if you disputes with a business that you find out the business's name. So we know that the business's name in this case was No Guarantees, whether it's a company, an incorporated organisation, etc. You notice down here it says, do you need a lawyer? What you need to really understand, and something that you could use as evidence, particularly if you're presenting that VCAT is a good option here, is that you actually need to ask for VCAT's permission, and lawyers usually are not allowed to represent you for a claim that is less than $15,000. So that's a really, really good specific bit of information you can use. Hey, Zena VCAT maybe is appropriate for Zena because lawyers are prohibited effectively for matters under $15,000, so it's not going to be too costly for her. She's not going to have to foot that bill. She's certainly not going to be outgunned by an opposing lawyer as a result. And then a little bit more info there. But we are going to click on the Apply Now option and just see what this process is like for a Year 12 student who maybe doesn't have a lot of money. It gives us the list of things again. Before we click to start the online form to have a quick look at it, we do want to look at how much this is going to cost Zena. And this will give me a whole list of the goods and services fees at VCAT. And we're just going to look straight away at, we're not going to need an urgent injunction. So disputes about goods and services, ours is less than or between $1 and $3,000. So assuming that as a student, Zena has a healthcare card, this is actually going to be a free service for her. So it's really important that you note that. Basically, for any matter up to $15,000, if you have a healthcare card, it's free. So another reason why VCAT is appropriate is that it's going to be affordable for Zena. She isn't going to have to pay a fee, assuming that she has a healthcare card. If she doesn't, that fee is still quite low. And she's not going to have to pay for lawyers because she's not going to be allowed to have them. You'll go down here as well. You note that there can be hearing fees if we end up having to have a hearing, but hearing fees do not apply if your claim is under $15,000. So again, for a claim like this, we know that, and this is, history shows that on an exam, these are the sort of scenarios we're given. We know that, well, it's probably not going to cost Zena anything. So, hey, all good. Not going to cost us much. We can afford it, or nothing at all. So why don't we actually look at the online form and see what starting a claim at VCAT is like. VCAT straight away before we start our application wants to tell us, hey, maybe you should try and reach an agreement. Okay? Could save you time, could save you money. These are things we consider before initiating a claim. If we just check this again, we'll notice that no guarantees has refused to answer Zena's calls or emails. So we've tried that. Understand this is a legal process. You must follow VCAT's decision. So we know that VCAT makes binding decisions. And then a little bit more about just knowing who you're dealing with. So, and they give us some nice time estimations here. Let's start our application. Look, I won't go too far through this because I want to get to what actually happens when VCAT opens a case. But effectively, look how easy this is. You know, it's about a service. You can check what a service is. I bought the service. Yep, I'm Zena. What was the problem? I could say maybe not as advertised, but I'm going to say other, and I could write in here. They lost my address. Probably want to put in a little bit more detail. It asks you if you need an interim injunction and so on. So the application process itself is actually then pretty easy. Let's leave that and just head back to the main VCAT page and now look at, okay, let's imagine that we've gone through and submitted that claim. What is VCAT going to do to resolve my dispute? So if we click here, steps to resolve a case, and we're going to go straight to when VCAT opens a case. So imagine we've done that form where Zena, we've decided that VCAT's the best option, and we're going to find a little bit more detail about why. VCAT, when they receive the application, they're going to review it to make sure that it fits their jurisdiction. And if it does, they'll open up a case. I want to jump straight to here, talk a little bit about getting a reference number, but that's not important. What happens next? Depending on the type of case, we may give instructions about how the case will be managed. We refer many cases directly to mediation, directions hearings, or small claims hearings without first making orders. Okay? That's really important to understand, is that VCAT itself is not mediation, which is a common misconception or mistake people make. But VCAT is likely to refer you to mediation as a dispute resolution method. Why? Because they want to resolve the dispute without having to use up any of their time, if possible. Okay? If, for example, that doesn't resolve the dispute and we end up with a hearing, or we want to go to a hearing, we can actually check how long it's going to take. Go down civil claims list. On average, consumer cases up to $15,000, it takes 8 weeks from application to final hearing. So again, another reason why maybe Zena wants to use VCAT, or VCAT might be appropriate, is because it's going to be quite quick. 8 weeks is significantly quicker than it will take going through the court. Let's just squeeze down a little bit though, because, where is it? We want to look at resolving a case by agreement. So, like the courts as well, with we're going to learn about things like discovery, etc., and court-ordered mediation, trying to resolve disputes early. If you file an application with VCAT, VCAT is still going to want to do everything in its power to get you to resolve the dispute without having to, again, use its own timer. Because the more cases that are resolved between parties, the less hearings VCAT has to run, and that means they can continue to offer really timely and quick dispute resolution. So they have this whole section here on resolving a case by agreement, and they say, hey, you might be able to negotiate with the other party. If you do, there's no need to attend a hearing, and basically you can do this anytime you want, and you need to advise VCAT if you reach an agreement. So even if you filed a claim, keep trying to negotiate with the other party. And you know what? Sometimes at VCAT will actually provide you with alternative dispute resolution to try and get you to resolve it with our support. And what do they offer? Well, mediation, which hopefully, if depends on what order you're looking at it. My class absolutely is looking at mediation straight after this. So we're going to go out of order of the study design a little bit. But if you haven't already, mediation is basically a confidential meeting where you discuss ways to resolve your dispute, and a mediator supports you. So sits between you effectively. They don't make the decision. They can't offer suggestions, but they're going to try and help you resolve it instead of VCAT deciding the case for you at a hearing. So what do you need to bring to mediation? Documents, etc. You can prepare how you're going to, or what you're going to say. Consider the other party's point of view. Don't bring any weapons. And basically, as it says here, at mediation, the mediator will explain the process. You'll get a chance to have your say. You'll make time for all issues and options to be explored. The mediator doesn't take sides, make suggestions, make a decision, so on and so forth. So effectively, they're going to try and get you to resolve the dispute together before they give you a hearing. If you reach an agreement at mediation, let us know immediately by telephone, and then they'll basically sign you off and take you out of the formal hearing process. One of the other options VCAT offers, and I should have highlighted in here, sorry, that mediations can take anywhere from an hour to a full day. So we'll tell you how much time to set aside. So effectively, they're going to say, hey, before we give you a hearing, we are going to try and get you to resolve it yourself with our support. They might also get you to do a compulsory case conference. These are, again, really similar. You get either a VCAT member or a mediator. You meet confidentially and you try and discuss the dispute to come to a decision. The member or mediator does not make a decision, but they will offer suggestions. And you have to attend this. This is really important to know that you have to if you're ordered to. Okay? Really, really important. Again, don't bring weapons. At a compulsory conference, which goes for a half day or a full day, I imagine they wouldn't use this in Zena's manner, which is a little more straightforward and cut and dry. But effectively, the member or the mediator will ask you to give a summary of how you see the dispute. They're trying to figure out what the key issues are. And basically, they'll try and clarify things. They'll discuss settlement options, that sort of thing. And again, if you resolve your dispute, let them know. And what happens if you miss it. Something else that's really important to know about VCAT is they also have this new or relatively new method of trying to resolve disputes. And they might send you into what they call their Fasttrack mediation and hearing. Now, this wouldn't work for Zena because hers is $300, and this is for matters of $500 to $10,000. But what they've basically set up at VCAT is effectively a fast track between mediation and your hearing. So you're going to try and come into VCAT and get everything resolved in the same day. And this is a really, really good bit of depth knowledge to have if you're discussing why VCAT can be a good option for a consumer dispute. Because you can say, well, you might be eligible for fast track mediation and hearing. And basically, this is where you go in, you do your mediation, And if you can't resolve your dispute, you go to a VCAT hearing within a few hours. So same day, you don't have to pay any fees. Effectively, you'll try and resolve it together. So imagine this is Zena and no guarantees. And if you can't, a couple of hours later, you go into a hearing with a VCAT member who makes the decision for you. Now, in terms of, so that's just a little bit extra on that one, in terms of what that means or what happens at a hearing, if you can't resolve this dispute and you do end up with it in a hearing, effectively, a little bit of detail about being there 30 minutes early. Effectively, a VCAT hearing is like a trial in a way. There's obviously not going to be a jury or anything like that if you've requested one, but it is like a mini trial. It's less formal than the court, but there are still rules to follow. And cases are heard by VCAT members who could actually be judges, so judicial members. You can't bring weapons. You get a right to a fair hearing. Hearings are open to the public, etc., etc. Be polite, so on and so forth. But effectively, what would happen at a hearing is you're basically going to put forward your side of the dispute. You're going to put forward any evidence you have, and at the same time, the other party's going to get a chance to do theirs. And then the member will make a decision for you. So you won't get a say, you won't have any control over the decision anymore. So that's why trying to resolve things through mediation first can be a really good option before actually getting to a VCAT hearing. Because one of the weaknesses with VCAT is that it has really limited appeal options. So say we are Zena and we go down this VCAT pathway. We know that VCAT's actually really appropriate for Zena because it's cheap. She's a year 12 student. She's had to buy a second-hand dress, so she might not have a lot of money. It's quick. It's going to be resolved within 8 weeks if we end up at a hearing. But VCAT's also going to try and get us to resolve it through alternative methods as well, which is really, really helpful. But VCAT might not be appropriate because there's really limited appeal avenues. So if we get to a hearing and for whatever reason the matter is found in favour of no guarantees, then Zena has really no option to follow this up. As we saw early on looking at VCAT, VCAT was very clearly said, if you are not sure about your rights, make sure you go to Consumer Affairs Victoria to just figure out what the go is. So one of our other options, if we were Zena, is to talk to Consumer Affairs Victoria. Consumer Affairs Victoria also have quite a straightforward and easy to follow website. And if we jump on, we can go, I've got a problem with complaint. How can Consumer Affairs Victoria help me solve that? And straight away, they're like, hey, we can provide information in a variety of areas. However, sometimes there are other organisations that can help you better. To find the most appropriate organisation, view our Who to Go for Help page. So straight away, Consumer Affairs Victoria, similar to, in a way, VCAT being resolve it yourself first, Consumer Affairs Victoria is well, if it's someone else's problem, go there first so that then we can continue to resolve things that are in our power quickly and easily. We know that this is a consumer matter and we know that this falls in VCAT's, Consumer Affairs Victoria's remit, so we're going to go to know your rights. The first step to resolving a dispute is knowing basically whether you can resolve your dispute, whether your rights have actually been infringed. And if we actually click here and go to products and services, we can find out a little bit more information. I'm going to whip through this super quickly. We have a problem with a service. Services cause damage to property. We didn't get our property back. Hey, a consumer can seek compensation from the provider of a service when that service causes damage. The loss, so there we go, the loss or damage must have been reasonably foreseeable and not caused by something outside of human control, such as a natural disaster. So unless a tsunami randomly rolled through, no guarantees, hey, it's reasonably foreseeable that if they didn't keep track of my address, they could lose it, I suppose. And basically, if we look here, if there's a problem with the service or if you're having a dispute, view our resolve your problem or complaint section, which is going to spit us back to where we just came from. So we now know our rights. So let's speak with the people involved. And you'll find that CAV, in a way, takes a really similar tone to VCAT. They say, hey, the second step to resolving a problem is speaking with the people involved. Okay? So if it's the business, you need to explain the problem you have and approach them directly, either in person, over the phone, or by email, or on the business's social media page. And here's some things you can do. Now, we know already that Zena has tried this with calls and emails, so we're going to skip straight through this. We're going to go right to the people involved. Now, Consumer Affairs Victoria says to us, hey, if it's still not resolved, why don't you write to them? So we want you to send them a complaint letter and we want you to put it in writing so you have a record of it. They even give you templates for this, okay? So let's imagine that if we go back to Zena here, let's imagine that Zena's called no guarantees and that was speaking with the people involved, and her emails were actually writing to the people involved. And we've got no response. So we're going to tick straight through. They even give you tips on like, hey, if it's a franchise store, who should you send it to? Let them know that if they don't reply, you're going to take it further, so on and so forth. So taking your problem further. And this is where we want to see what CAV can actually do to understand a little bit more about their powers and when it's appropriate to use them. Really interestingly, and I was probably a little bit surprised when I jumped on and saw this. Once you've written to them and tried to speak with them, the next thing CAV tries to tell you to do is, hey, if it's something you paid for by credit card, they'd prefer you to get in contact with your bank or credit card provider and try and get the money back for you, as opposed to CAV getting involved to talk to the business. So they're more worried about, hey, here's the ways you can get your money back, and then hopefully we don't have to do anything. And it literally tells you like, hey, eBay has a resolution center for up to 45 days. Like, why don't you approach them? Don't come to us until you've exhausted all other avenues. But let's assume that obviously we've lost our dress. So we're not going to really be able to get that money. Like, I don't want the money back for the dry cleaning. I want the dress back, right? So none of those things really apply to me. So we're going to jump through to, okay, after we've jumped through all these hoops, when can Consumer Affairs Victoria get involved? And this is really going to show you the limitations of Consumer Affairs Victoria as a dispute resolution body. Basically, they say, hey, if you put a complaint in, we're only going to accept it if it's about a business. You can't put in a complaint about a consumer. We're only going to accept it if you've made a reasonable attempt to resolve the problem already. We're only going to approach it if legislation appears to have been breached. The problem has a reasonable chance of being resolved. So in this one, if no guarantees is closed, they might go, it's not going to get resolved, so we're not going to get involved. If a chargeback has failed to resolve the problem, so if you did pay by credit card, they're going to make sure you've done that first. And obviously, this one's really important. You can't go to CAV after you've gone to the courts or tribunal. So once you've gone to the courts or tribunal, CAV is off, basically off the list. You can't use them anymore. So let's say, hey, Consumer Affairs Victoria decide that Zena's dispute is appropriate for them. Basically, this is what CAV is going to do. They're going to contact the business on your behalf. Okay? So all the things you've tried to do, they're now going to do on your behalf, because apparently they're going to have a better impact. And explore options for a resolution that are consistent with the law. We cannot make anyone speak to us and we cannot enforce an outcome. Only a court or tribunal have this power. If our involvement does not resolve the problem, we will generally give you information on taking your complaint further by applying to a court or tribunal, such as VCAT, or getting your own legal advice. So look, Consumer Affairs Victoria is, I mean, in a way, it is a wonderful first option if you have a consumer dispute, because they provide you more with information. They educate you on ways that you can resolve the dispute. Hey, why don't you write to them? We'll give you a friendly template to do that. Basically tell you what your rights are. Like, do you deserve a refund? That sort of thing, in the hope that you'll resolve it yourself. Then CAV say, well, look, we can get involved, but we can't force anything. We have no ability to provide a binding outcome. Do note that the way that they approach it, the way that they call on your behalf and talk through and offer suggestions, is what we would call a conciliatory approach. It is like conciliation, because effectively they're offering suggestions, but they can't make any binding outcomes. And I do love that they say, hey, if we can't resolve it through discussion and through providing suggestions, we're basically going to tell you to go to VCAT anyway. So in terms of looking back at this with Zena, we didn't really need to bring CAV into it. We went through some really good evidence just before about like VCAT's appropriate because of its cost, because there's, a lack of legal representation required. It's quicker, but it might not be appropriate because, the lack of appeal options and stuff like that. But effectively, like if this said, discuss the appropriateness of VCAT or CAV, we could really say with CAV, hey, it might be appropriate because it's a free service. It would help educate Zena on her rights and responsibilities, promoting access. But ultimately, it couldn't force no guarantees to return the dress or give her the money for it. It couldn't force no guarantees to even engage with all the parties. And ultimately, they might just give Zena the information of how to go to VCAT anyway. Look, hopefully that provides you a little bit more information, a little bit more depth, I suppose, into how VCAT and CAV try to resolve civil disputes. I think you can see quite clearly that VCAT's approach is, hey, we're going to help you resolve it yourself. Apply by all means, put in an application, but we're going to try and help you resolve it yourself. We're going to force you into mediation. We're going to provide you with templates and support for negotiation, and only if we have to are we going to hold a hearing. I should have noted before, a VCAT hearing is not arbitration. That's a different thing, okay? And just don't fall into that trap. But effectively, hey, how's VCAT going to resolve a civil dispute? Well, they're going to try and get you to resolve it yourself. And if for whatever reason you can't, they'll come in at the end and provide a binding outcome. CAV, on the other hand, well, not really on the other hand at all, they're going to try and get you to resolve it yourself. They're going to provide you with education. They're going to provide you with support. Okay? But ultimately, they're going to get you to resolve it yourself. The difference being that CAV can't come in at the end and force an outcome through a hearing like VCAT can. CAV can only come in and basically offer suggestions, try and get you an outcome, but ultimately if they can't, they're just going to send you to VCAT anyway. So in a way, you could argue that CAV might potentially be a bit of a waste of time, even though they do provide, I suppose, a good chance of resolving a dispute in the first place by having a little bit more firepower than perhaps you contacting a business yourself. As I said, hopefully that helps you understand a little bit more about how each of these bodies operate, and provide you with, a bit more targeted information to use in any case studies that your teachers or VCAT throw at us at the end of the year. Look, more importantly, through the next little period, make sure you stay safe, practice all that social distancing and the like, look after your families, and hopefully we'll be back at school in no time and able to give VCE and our end of year exams a real red hot crack. Feel free to leave any feedback through comments below, that sort of thing, and definitely reach out if there's anything specific that you reckon we could help out with or do a video on, because we're keen to throw a bit more stuff out there. Cheers for watching, and as I said, stay safe.